I've had a question for a little while now. Does the active track in a DJI drone work well to film myself when I'm out mountain biking? One of the things I love shooting on my channel are these adventure style films. I've climbed to the highest peaks in Mexico. I've gone deep in the jungles of Thailand to follow some elephants. And a little while ago, I mountain biked to the top of Big Bear. When I was on that mountain biking trip, I brought along a Mavic Air and I didn't really get the best shots. I didn't have a good setup to where I could use the controller while mountain biking, and I didn't really know the limitations of my drone in that setting. And so when I did that video, there's very few drone shots, and the drone shots that I got of me mountain biking are pretty awful. So there's two problems that come up when trying to operate a drone as a solo creator. One is, how do you use the controller? Because usually the controller's in your hand, and when you're mountain biking, well, you have to hold on to the mountain bike. And then the second issue is the active track itself. What are the limitations when it comes to following someone on a mountain bike when they're going up, back down, and there's obstacles like trees and bushes and just the hillside in general. Now, one quick side note, all of this footage is being graded with my new set of drone LUTs that I just built, and I'll add links down below in the description to where you can check those out. So you might be thinking, why not just get the Skydio 2? Well, that drone is a good drone for this kind of filmmaking, following someone and keeping them centered the entire time. However, I like using DJI drones because I don't just want a drone that can follow me. I also want a good drone that I can control myself and get really cinematic looking footage. And also the sensors on DJI drones are great. This one is the Air 2S. It's got that 1-inch sensor. It shoots 5.4K. Like, it's a much better drone overall than the Skydio 2, which is mainly just a drone for following action. So the Air 2S has the best active track that I've found in a DJI drone. When you're using something like a Mini 2, it doesn't have any active tracking features. And then the older models like the Mavic 2 Pro aren't as good as the Air 2S. Now, when I was doing my review around the Air 2S, I found that the active track works super well in following my Jeep. So last week I got a brand new mountain bike, and I thought this was the perfect time to set up the drone for mountain bike filming because I want to do some mountain biking adventure films in the future on this channel. So let's go over the first issue, which is mounting the controller. Well, I found this $20 attachment. It's basically like a big GoPro attachment, the way that it's set up. You have a thumb screw on the side, which hooks a mounting plate to your controller, and this piece hooks up to your handlebars. Now, this has like a rubber insert, so you're not gonna scratch up your handlebars, and it hooks to your controller very easily. You just hook in the top, click on the bottom, and when your phone's in there, you're good to go. Now, this isn't set up for the smart controller. It's only gonna work with the original controller that comes with the DJI drone. The one issue that I've had is going downhill at faster speeds with lots of bumps. So I've gotten this piece mounted super tight on my handlebars, and it still seems to move slightly when I'm in like a kind of setting, when I'm going downhill and it's very bumpy. And that's been like the only gripe I've had around this mount. It's a cheap mount. I'm gonna look and see if there's other ones out there. It will work for most situations, but definitely it does slide a little bit, and maybe I can add some more rubber or something else inside here to make it even tighter. But I've cinched this thing down to where the plastic is touching the plastic on the outside of it, and it still slides slightly when I'm going downhill at faster speeds. Now, when it's mounted on your handlebars, it solves all the problems of actually being able to control your drone, because you just have this right in front of you. You can set up your active track, just swipe the screen, and then you can use your thumbsticks when you need to move the drone around and reposition. Also, when I'm riding my bike, I can quickly glance down and actually see that it still has a lock on when I'm riding through a trail. So when the drone does lose connection with me, the rider, I can tell pretty quickly that the drone isn't following me anymore. I haven't really had any situations where I've gotten super far away and the drone's not following, because I've just been able to glance down once in a while and I can see where the drone is. Now, the second thing I wanted to explore was the limitations of active track in DJI's drones. So first we have to understand how active track works. It's a visual tracking. So it sees an object on the screen and it tracks that using visual line of sight. Now, the active track has gotten better where if you do go behind something, the drone will continue to track for a short period of time, and if you pop out the other side, it will grab you and continue tracking. So the visual tracking has gotten better, but ideally you're gonna wanna have a visual line of sight the entire time when you're filming. So I took the drone up to the mountains around where I live, and there's a lot of good open areas where I could test out all the different limitations when it comes to the actual tracking style. Now, there's not a whole lot of trees, however, it is very hilly and there is some tall brush. So I was able to test how this drone works when moving up and down. Because one limitation on older models of drones is that it wouldn't follow you down. However, with the new tracking, it does follow you both up and down, but I found that it only works in certain settings and sometimes it doesn't work fast enough and you'll slam into the side of the hill. So let me show you how the tracking works. When you have your drone turned on, you just pull from one corner of your object to the other corner, and it's gonna grab that subject. So for me on my bike, it's just gonna grab me and lock on me on a bike. If I was using my Jeep, it would lock on to my Jeep. Now there's three options that pop up on screen once the subject is locked. You have active track on the left, you have spotlight in the center, and then you have point of interest. So spotlight basically just keeps the drone in one spot, and the drone will move wherever you go. But the drone itself is not going to fly in any direction. It's gonna stay one point in the sky and just move and control the camera up and down and rotate. That's pretty much it. Point of interest is where you have your subject in the center and the drone is going in a full 360 around that subject, keeping you centered the entire time. And then active track is where the drone is actually moving through space, tracking the subject. Now I found that when mountain biking, using the spotlight feature is actually really useful. You get the drone up in a spot where you can see the landscape and the drone will be able to follow so you can see a big wide expansive shot of wherever the subject is moving. And when I'm mountain biking, it looks really cool to be able to see this big perspective. And using the spotlight tracking feature, I found that you can actually get pretty far away from the drone and it's gonna continue to track. So I can see myself using the spotlight feature, put up the drone, lock onto me, get it a little bit ahead of me on the trail, and then I could ride through the trail and it will follow me so I can see the path of what's going on from moving towards the drone and then away from the drone. Or I have the drone off to the side and it's slowly following and panning as I'm moving through the scene. Now, point of interest is great to use when you're mountain biking when I get to like the top of a peak. I found that every time I would get up to the top of a point, I would put it in point of interest and just let it run and I could just get this 360 view of wherever I'm at. So both of those are super useful for mountain biking. Spotlight, you're not gonna have to worry about the drone hitting anything. And point of interest, as long as you're up high and you can visually see that your drone's not gonna hit anything in its orbit, then it's easy to use because you just change the speed from slow to fast and let the drone do its own orbit. But let's get into the active track where the drone is actually following you as you're traveling through space. So when you click the active track button, there's two options that pop up, trace and parallel. Now trace is interesting because basically what that feature is supposed to do is just follow you. It's like a follow cam. It goes right behind and wherever you go, the drone goes. But there is something interesting that I found, and that is if I put the drone super like dead in front, I can put it on the trace mode and it will actually follow in front and it will keep me centered. So if I slide to one side of the trail, I'll actually see the drone follow me to that direction. It's like it's bound to you and it's gonna move with you wherever you go. Now the tracking's not perfect and it's not gonna move immediately, but what I've been finding is that it stays pretty locked on. Now, if the drone is off to the side, so say I'm riding down the trail this way and I have the drone off to the side here and I have it on trace, it's gonna let me pass and then come behind and follow. Now I tried this going downhill, going uphill, and if you give your drone enough time to be able to react to the surface, it does go up hills and down hills. The Air 2S has front sensors, back sensors, tops and bottom. So when it does see a hill, it does go up the hill. Now let's talk about the parallel active track because it acts a little bit differently and it's a little bit more limiting in terms of how it tracks you as the subject moving through space. So how parallel works is basically wherever your subject is, if the drone's off to the side, it's gonna follow on the side, and no matter where this subject goes, the drone stays in the same position. It's not gonna rotate, at least it's not supposed to rotate that much. It's not gonna be like trace where it comes swoops behind. The idea of using parallel is that it keeps the same drone direction. And there's definitely some issues I've found with the obstacle avoidance and using the parallel mode. So it will follow you up and down. It does take a second for it to start moving down after you descend down a hill. Now, using the parallel mode, it doesn't have to be in front or just to the side. You can have it right behind you. You could have it off to the corner. Basically, anywhere in a 360 view, wherever that drone is, it's gonna stay that same position and follow. So say I wanted it behind at like a 3/4 moving down a trail, well, the drone will stay at that 3/4. It's a pretty cool mode to be able to get cinematic looking footage from a specific perspective and hold that position without panning. If I want the drone to pan, I'm either gonna use point of interest or I'm gonna use the trace mode where it's actually following me through the scene. So after working with the Air 2S on a few rides, I can safely say that the active track will work well when mountain biking with a few limitations. So one is if there's any scene where there's lots of trees, the only two modes that will really work well will be the trace mode where the drone can be right behind me and just following me. And in that mode, I won't be able to move super fast on a windy trail. If there's lots of trees and I'm on a single track trail, the drone might get stuck because you could see on some of the single track footage, the drone will follow, but it's not gonna follow the trail exactly. It's gonna go up and over some of the little sections where you're weaving back and forth. So if there's a tree on that section where you're weaving around, well, the drone's gonna get caught and it's gonna get stuck. But if it's a trail that's a little bit more open or there's more of straight lines and not so curvy, then the trace will work super well. The other mode that's gonna work is the spotlight, because you could put the drone up, it's not gonna fly into anything, and it will follow you through trees. So if you go in and out of trees, the drone will pick you up as you move through the trees. Obviously, if it's super wooded and you're seeing only bits of you, it's not gonna follow. But if it's sparse enough where you can actually see the person moving through the scene, then that will work. Now on trails that are more open, say a mountain trail, well, I could have the drone in parallel or trace mode, and the only thing I really have to worry about is using the parallel mode and going uphill, because that's when I've had issues where the drone actually gets stuck on the hillside. But if I'm traveling downhill or it's more flat, and say I'm on a ridgeline, that parallel mode is gonna be super useful because it has such a cool perspective where I could be moving on the trail and you could see everything in the distance and you're off to the side. And this gets me really excited for the Mavic 3 because that drone is gonna have side sensors. So it might actually help with all these issues where the drone's not able to react quick enough because of those side sensors. And I'm interested to see how much better the active track gets with that drone. So if you want to learn more about the Air 2S, I'll put a link down below in the description to my review and my beginner's guide all around this drone. And also I'll add links to the bike mount that I used so that you can go get one and play around with it yourself. Also, I have a brand new set of drone LUTs that you can use for your log or your standard footage. I'll put links to those down below in the description. And next, I highly suggest you check out this video here. It's a complete beginner's guide on how to fly your drone for creating awesome video content. I will see you over there.